Welcome back to the Locker Room podcast number 31, and the final one in the series of the year. We've got a big one. We've got three Down legends on the show today. We've got our own Steven Poacher, coaching consultant with DSS. We've also got two men on that know what it's like to lose an All-Ireland final, 2010 beaten finalist Down. We've got, from that team, we've got Marty, Clarke and Benny Coulter. Welcome on to the show, lads. Just before we start, I'd just like to thank our sponsors, Ripped, for all the support they've given us all year. Head over to the website there for more information. Okay, we'll start with you, Marty. What were your general thoughts about the game at the weekend?
I thought for the first three quarters, Mayo dominated a lot of aspects of the game. Kick-outs. They weren't losing the ball in areas where most teams against Dublin were losing it. They weren't turning the ball over as such. And they had a lot of guys playing well. But you feared for them because they weren't in the lead. They were never able to get, I think they were 2 points up before O'Callaghan's goal. That was the furthest they got. And I think from watching Dublin over the last number of seasons, and I know they have had a big basketball influence in terms of their team defence and their team offence. It's almost they play the game now like a couple of the American codes where they really know whatever happens for the first three quarters and sometimes even more, they're just absorbing it. They're almost playing within themselves. And then when that crunch time comes, that last period, if they're in the lead, they generally add to it a bit and then see it out. Or like we saw last year in the final, the drawn final against Kerry, if they really have to come out and go for it in those last parts of games, they do it. They're just so good. I think it was a classic example of a team that really don't know how to lose against a team that cannot win a final. And I really did feel that. And Mayo played well, and a lot of their players played well, but still, they were fairly convincingly beaten at the end.
Brenton, did you think that there was any doubt that Dublin were going to lose that game? Was it always going to be a Dublin win?
I thought at half time, if Mayo were to stand any chance they needed to begin up a couple of points, but into half time they were 2 points down and Dublin hadn't really started. Mayo kicked a lot short in the first half to give a couple of balls away. Any chance that Dublin got, they took it and scored. And I think for me, and we'll look at it later on, I think for me, the biggest thing that Mayo could have done was get the scores on the board. And they didn't do that. And for them to win that game, they had to take every chance. And it just didn't happen for them. As Marty said, for 40, 45 minutes, they matched them everywhere throughout the pitch. But for me, the biggest thing was that Dublin took their chances and Mayo didn't. And how Mayo went in at half-time, 2 points down, I'll never know.
Yeah, Mayo maybe should have made more of that first half. Okay, just starting off, obviously Dublin got off to a great start there, Marty. And it's something that you want to talk about. It's Dublin and how they score those goals, because they seem to get a lot of goals, either with a fist or with a palm. And of course, there at the beginning, Dean Rock got that goal after, I think, 15 seconds or go. And it's about their ability, how they score their goals. Not actually the amount that they get, but how they actually get them.
Yeah, I think the goals, those two goals in the final, signify what this Dublin team's all about. It's team first, it's process driven. You don't see the spectacular goals on the big day that we associate with some teams in the All-Ireland final. Yes, McCaffrey scored a brilliant goal last year in the final, and Merchant after 11 seconds of the second half last year, let's not forget, against Kerry. Right at the start of that half. But I think this year more than ever, they scored 8 championship goals and 5 of those were with the palm or with the fist, as O'Callaghan did. And they're working it into areas where they almost cannot miss. Now, I do think in terms of if I was coaching against Dublin, and that would be daunting, but if James McCarthy's coming through with the ball like that, Dublin scored 8 goals and 104 points this year. James McCarthy scored 1 point. For all his strengths and for all his ability, kicking a beautiful goal like that, yes, he probably hasn't his locker, but I would have advised the likes of the likes of Harrison, who left Dean Rock because that was a defender in him, start of an All-Ireland final. He had to cover his goal, but that left Dean Rock totally open, and it allowed McCarthy that hand pass that he's so good at, that set for Rock just to pan to the net. And it's actually a more difficult finish than Rock makes that look, because he had to get it over Clarke, but back down again. But I would have mentioned in the week, if they're coming through, make them take the shot on, because it's more difficult than that set across for them to push in that team goal. They call it TGs down in Dublin, those team goals. And the second one was worked so well as well, although the set from Scully, he probably overpassed that a little bit. So Callahan had a stretch for it and really lash at it with his right hand, where you lose a bit more control over it. But again, they sniffed the goal and they took it so well. And I think, watching their games throughout the year, they're not having these shots from 16, 18 metres out trying to break the net. They're working it in, and if that isn't on, they'll just clip it over the bar and set up again. And I think it's kind of the same with their point taking. They will only have a shot from that scoring zone. And I think when Mannion came on just before the second half water break, he picked away from on the Hogan stand side. And it was from way outside the normal scoring zone. And I remember thinking to myself how strange it looked for a Dublin player to kick a wide, maybe 7-8 metres wide from so far out. And maybe that's why Mannion isn't in the team as regularly as a lot of us would like. But obviously he redeemed himself with that free kick. But it's just all about the statistics, the high percentage scoring zone. And a lot of their scores this year have been from central locations as well, which is, Benny will tell you, it's so much easier to kick the ball over the bar if you don't have to work it, if you don't have to spin it, if you don't have to try and get that work from the angles. Anywhere central, probably Brian Hard's kick was the most difficult point they had for the game, and that was just a quality player seizing a big moment. I think once that went over, you knew they weren't going to lose. But outside of that, 104 points in their 5 championship games, and the vast majority from that central channel, no further than 30 to 40 metres out. I think the final thing I'll say on it is, even in their National League games this year, Dean Rock doesn't even have a goal now from outside 45 in the winter games. They're just working it, because I would say that they would know the percentage is, unless the sun's splitting the rocks, Dean will not be having a go from there. Let's work it until we get something. And they're so patient and they frustrate defences. And I was chatting to Stevie about this actually. It's almost something, because it's so predictable. They're not going to be shooting from the wings and they're not going to be shooting from the corners. But how do you defend against it, even though if you try and drop off them too much and only engage when they enter the zone? O'Callaghan, Small, these guys will have too much momentum. They'll go past you, or they'll win a free, and they just do it so well. And there's so many guys who are comfortable at taking those scores, and that was the difference. Because if you look at Mayo, we mentioned the balls they dropped short, the chances they missed, they were all from outside that scoring zone. There was probably one or two. I know Matty Ruan dropped one on his weaker left foot very early in the game. But outside of that, a lot of them were more difficult attempts that Dublin just don't take on. They'll recycle that, and then they'll really get a good look at it from directly in front. So that, for me, their goal chances, they only go for goal when they're right on top of the keeper. If they can pass it by him, great. And the points from those. And
they're very good. They're very good, Marty, at playing that ball around the periphery of that D. As you say, they're very, very patient. But just on Con's goal, when Con gets that ball within 30 metres, he's immediately a goal threat. And the alarm bells just come on straight away from Mayo. And, I think he started that. I think he actually cleaned Mullen, and he played a little 1-2, got it back again. He's just a major goal threat, isn't he, Marty?
Yeah, my belief is that that bounce dummy that he took Mullen out of the game, when he was dropping that ball, he was going for a point. Sometimes those best dummies are when he thought he was going to get blocked by Mullen, so he quickly pulled it back in, he gave it to Scully, and then he was gone. He might say different, but I anytime I was able to pull that dummy off, it's generally you are going for the point on the left, and then you're fearing the block, so instinct takes over. But once he gave that to Scully, there was only one thing in their mind, and again, Scully wasn't looking for anything else other than the set. You hear it in volleyball, the alley-oop in basketball. They're just teeing it up for their teammate to finish it off, and it's amazing how consistent they are at it.
Absolutely. And Stevie, I think you talked a lot about, that D area and just working the ball around that D area. And under Jim Gavin, they've done it a lot, but it seems to have continued under Desi Farrell. That discipline not to shoot in the wrong areas, to make sure that they work it into the scoring zone. They've done that very well on Saturday.
Yeah, there's no question, Joe, and it's great insight from Marty there about it, because the reality of the situation is, Joe, that, and I said this to Marty actually earlier, this team is driven, in my honest opinion, by science and data, and everything is very much, meticulously planned. As Marty talked about the process, you heard Jim Gavin speak about the process on so many occasions in his interviews. The guys stick to the process, and I think it was Martin that actually mentioned this fact, that it's probably it probably is lost, Joe, in how difficult that is to ingrain that into a group of players, and how much discipline it takes for a group of players to really stringently follow that to the letter of the law. Because I've had teams in the past, Joe, at club, at county level, that will do everything, even schools level, everything they're asked to do. But it doesn't last that long, Joe, and after a couple of seasons or a season or two, you start to see wee things creep in. Things that maybe didn't exist in the first season or the second season. And that's not like, any sort of stigma attached to the management team or the job they're doing. I think it's just the mindset of the player, because maybe the players got comfortable and they know that they're comfortable. And I think one of the biggest things I took out of that, Joe, that mentality, is Dean Rock. Dean Rock's 30 years of age. In 2012, Dean Rock was dropped from the panel by Pat Gilroy. In 2013, he was recalled to the panel by Jim Gavin's first year, because he had a really good season with the club in 2012, 2013. In 2015, Joe, he was taken off at half-time in the final. And since 2015, in the last 5 finals, he has averaged 3 points from play. His free-taking stats have gone through the roof. Martin has talked about it there separately, about the fact that, they don't take that high percentage, or that low percentage free kick, I should say, which is outside the scoring range. Like, Dublin had 3 or 4 free kicks that even Martin, for example, himself would have said, I'm hitting that, I'm going to put that over, and probably, 99% of the time would have put it over from just outside the 45. But as Marty said, they're still high risk, they're still low percentage scorings. So they're thinking to themselves, well, look, we're going to work something. And I seen that happening, Marty, 3 or 4 times. And you're correct, you flagged that up, because the first thing that I thought about is Dean Rock not going to hit that. I was sort of thinking in the back of my head. But the point probably I'm going to come to then, Joe, is that the competition for places within the squad is just so severe. Marty talked about Mannion coming on, and I just sensed, even in the first half, I sensed that Paddy Small felt there was a timer on his head. I felt Paddy Small knew that he's going to be replaced by Mannion, and I've seen a couple of times Paddy Small nearly dying to get a shot away, dying to get a score away, just nearly to prove himself and to keep himself on that pitch. And I think Mannion's probably doing the same. He's coming on to prove a point, and I'm going to get a point here in the All-Ireland final. And it's Dean Rock probably has had that competition in the background, and it's actually probably in a strange way made him become so efficient at what he does. And I don't think Dean Rock gets the credit he deserves. But in general, Joe, it's just the players. It's just the players and how driven they are. And I think the competition for places is a massive factor, not massive.
Okay. What we'll do now is we'll move on to Mayo, because we haven't kind of discussed Mayo. And Brenton, I'll just move to you. Mayo's mistakes, they did make a lot of mistakes, and they couldn't replicate the first half performance in the second half. Obviously, Dublin ran away with it there in the last 20 minutes. Do you think that Mayo actually threw this game away, and it was there for the taking for Mayo?
Well, I watched the game today again. The first half did 4 short, 2 blocked, 2 wide, and they give away a sideline ball. O'Donoghue hit 1 short. Colin O'Callaghan got a point from it. Loftus kicked a long ball in to Killian O'Connor. Colin got the goal out of that, and sideline ball given away. Kilkenny get the point. Ruan kicked the ball short. Kilkenny get a point. So kicking the ball away in the first half, going for scores, and Dublin scored 1-3 out of them wasteful shots. So for me, I definitely think that Mayo kicked that game away. They give away easy ball in the final third, and Dublin punished them, and they punished them badly. First half, as I say there, Dublin kicked 1-3 from Mayo's wasteful shots on goal. And Dublin don't do that. Like, Dublin don't waste the ball.
And as you said there, I think after 25 minutes or so, was Mayo not 8, Dublin 1-3. So it was 8 scores It was 8-4. What about the spur man, Bretton? Do you think they made much use of the spur man? I think it was the first 10 minutes of the second half. I'm not quite sure. I think it could have been even scores in that 10-minute period. But do you think they used Aidan O'Shea properly? I think they kicked maybe one ball into him, and I think he might have got a free from him. I'm not sure. But do you think they used the spur man well?
No, definitely not. I think they kicked one ball into Aidan O'Shea. What I would have done, started the second half, put Aidan O'Shea in the edge of the square and put ball into him. You know, they were a man up. It was for 10 minutes. And for me, I just didn't think they done enough in that period of the game. And that, for me, it was a massive period of the game for Mayo to go on and win the game, push on, maybe try and get it back to a draw and then kick on from there. And for me, I just don't think they used Aidan O'Shea well. And I don't think O'Shea had a great game. But putting him in the edge of the square, if you're putting him in, you got to get the ball in. You got to get it in early. And they just didn't do that. And even in the second half, they were very, very wasteful. They had 3 short and 3 wide. And, you know, out of them 6 opportunities, Dublin kicked 5 scores. Loftus kicked the ball wide. Scully got a point from the resulting kick out. McLaughlin got blocked down. Kilkenny went up the field to get a point. Killian O'Connor, he fisted a handy ball over the sideline. Howard went up the field to get that point. Storn Cohen, you know, he kicked the ball short. Kilkenny went up the field to get the point. So all of these possessions that Mayo had, Dublin punished them, and they punished them badly. Out of the whole game where Mayo were giving the ball away, Dublin punished them and kicked 1-8. You know, you cannot do that again, Dublin. You just simply cannot do that from positions that Mayo could have scored.
And I seen an interview with James Horn after the game, Marty. James Horn was saying that, you know, one of the reasons they could beat was because of Mayo's poor finishing. As you said, Bretton, they dropped a few balls into the keeper's hands. He also says Dublin's fitness, the loss of Paddy Durcan. But Marty, do you think Mayo could have won that game if those incidents had went right for them?
For me, the finishing is a Croke Park factor. I know Mayo scored 5-20 against Tipperary in the semi-final. A lot of those guys have played there more than anyone outside of Dublin, but they haven't played there anywhere near the amount of Dublin. When the pressure comes on, like Dublin put you under, and the glance up at the goals is a little bit more abrupt because you're under such pressure. All crazy things happen. Croke Park is not like a conventional ground. Benny's played there more than me. He'll tell you. The surroundings, the dimensions, everything is different. And that's why the second best group of players in Ireland this year, that has an impact on them, in my opinion. Once the heat is on, their bearings is just not as in as the Dublin players are, because Dublin don't make those mistakes. And for me, that's a big factor, particularly the drop short. You just, like, for me, the home ground advantage, it is massive. It is absolutely massive. Dublin players know it so well. And my solution is not, it's a national stadium. The final has to be played there. The semis too, yes. But get more teams into Croke Park throughout the year. Give every other team 4 sessions in Croke Park a year. There's 7 games in the National League. Have the 3 at home, 3 away, the other in Croke Park. Get teams in there, because Dublin just play it so well. And I remember my first number of times playing at Croke Park. Your eye isn't in. End of story. By the time we got back again after we beat Kerry in 2010, I played there for the minors a bit. But by the time you're there against Cork, because it's your 3rd time in a close proximity, you're starting to work it out. Look at even Coulter against Corofin in that final. The chances that they missed, the frees they missed. It's the only stadium environment as such in the country. The only actual genuine stadium, and it does funny things to your shooting at both ends. It's probably just a theory, but for me, you know, if that game maybe was played at Castlebar, would Mayo have missed those many chances? My answer to that, probably no.
Stevie, Mayo's inexperience of playing in Croke Park. Obviously, Dublin, all those players have played in Croke Park many, many times. Do you think that's unfair? And do you think it was one of the reasons why Mayo didn't actually kick on there in the last 20 minutes?
No, I don't think it's unfair, but I can see Marty's point as well, Joe. You know, and it's very interesting that Marty makes that point, because it just sort of casts my mind back to even 2018 when you know, Carlo went to Croke Park those couple of occasions, twice that year. and we had the third highest scorer in Ireland playing for us, Paul Broderick, who hit free kicks with his left foot like Martin off the deck and couldn't score in Croke Park, you know. And it's actually very interesting, Marty, you make that point, because when I think back to that now, chances that he would have struggled with that day and missed. And obviously, you know, first time playing at Croker, you know, obviously it's difficult. And then obviously, as Marty says, you know, some of the younger players, possibly Marty, Tommy Conroy, for example, I thought had a very, very quiet game for his standards. You know, Cillian O'Connor probably at this stage shouldn't have any excuses at all. And I thought he was reasonably good. I think he only missed one free kick. But yeah, some of the younger lads, or even Ryan O'Donoghue snapped at one. He snapped at one as well. You know, it is obviously, as Marty said, rightly said there, you know, it's a daunting place for everybody, but I totally echo his views on exposure to Croke Park. Like, teams need to have that experience, you know, they need to be given that experience no matter what division they're in, whether it's Division 4 or Division 1. It makes sense. They've proved this year in Croke Park that the pitch can handle 24 games in 7 weekends, you know, 3 or 4 games a weekend over the course of 7 weekends. And the pitch, okay, it was probably the worst condition we'd seen it from a surface point of view, but it was still the best surface in Ireland by a country mile. So it can handle the traffic. You're playing the league at a different stage of the year. You're only talking about, you know, what, 5 or 6 league games, you know, over the course of the National League. So I totally agree with what Marty's saying. I think we talk about finance, we talk about money, we talk about population. One of the simplest things that can be solved with Dublin right now is to take them out of Croke Park, you know, and not to have that familiarity, because as Marty rightly said, like it is their home, you know. They know every angle of it, they know every avenue of it, and they're a different animal. And lads, I know this might sound a bit simplistic, like, but even look at their scores this year. Like, they beat Westmeath by 10 points, right, in the championship this year, but the game was played in Portlaoise. If they played Westmeath and Croke Park, double that. You know, just double that. Like, and they beat Laois by 23 points. They beat Cavan out the gate, the Ulster champions, by 18, 19 points. And you're telling me Westmeath are within 10 of them? They're not. The fact that the game was actually played outside of Croke Park actually was a slight advantage for Westmeath that evening, you know. And listen, I'm not saying that Dublin weren't good that night. There were still elements of their game were excellent. But it does prove the point that when you take them out of Croker, they are slightly, you know, more vulnerable. But vulnerable is maybe the wrong word, but they're maybe just not as slick and as efficient and as sharp as they are when they're in Croker. So I totally echo what Marty's saying there, Joe, totally.
Yeah,
I think Stevie, while maybe Dublin aren't as sharp outside of it, certainly the opposition don't have that wow factor and don't have that issue that sometimes you get the feeling they do in Croker. I don't know, maybe Benny, you played there as a minor and everything else. How did you find it?
Yeah, but everybody wants to go and play in Croke Park, but definitely I do think Dublin have a major advantage. Like, if you're going to beat Dublin, I can't see anybody beating them in Croke Park in the next 4 or 5 years. I just can't see it, because as you say, Marty, the pitch, it plays bigger. It definitely plays a lot bigger. Dimensional wise, it's probably the same size, but it plays bigger. But as Stevie says there, any chance any team has of taking the dubs, it's out of Croke Park. But in Croke Park, next 4 or 5 years, I can't see anybody touching them. I really can't. They're so good in Croke Park. And listen, they have an advantage that they get to play so many times in Croke Park. Why not take them out for the National League? And as you say, Marty, let other teams play in Croke Park and give them, you know, that familiarity of getting to play in Croke Park, which teams don't get. Like, from the likes of Cavan there, they probably haven't played in Croke Park in 15 years. You know, how's that an advantage? Or it's just not right. Like, get other teams in and maybe get Dublin out for all their National League games.
Yeah, there is talk of them allowing a team each to play at Croke Park in the National League. Sorry, Marty, you were going to come in there.
No, sorry. I just, like, Benny played a lot of international rules games as well, but the 2010 pre-Croke Park game, we trained in Croke Park twice, and, you know, as a player, that experience in an empty stadium training, it's something I still remember, you know, and I remember being down at the hill and down at the Davin stand then, getting used to practicing free kicks, kicking the ball. It's a brilliant experience, but you know, you can see before the game, if you're ever at games, and you can see the dubs out walking around the pitch having their chat with their headphones on, and often the opposition are coming around and they're nearly have their phones out taking pictures of themselves in there, you know. But look, Dublin won the All-Ireland because they're by far the best team.
Yeah.
But there's no, I very much so, I know from my Australian rules experience too, the home ground advantage is absolutely huge. If you have to go to the teams in Perth and Brisbane, it's a totally different game than it is in the MCG. So something that I always find, you know, was was big.
And I think Stevie, you wanted to talk about Dublin's game management. Maybe that feeds into it too, playing at Croke Park. But I think their game management, Stevie, probably kicked in a wee bit earlier because of the black card. And I think you tweeted during the half-time break just to watch out for Dublin's game management and what they do against with the one man less. What do you think of Dublin's game management?
Well, Marty knows exactly what I'm going to say here, because me and him had this discussion a few years ago when we worked together at a club in Down in St John's. There we done a wee bit of work. Marty was obviously there for a couple of years. I'd give him and Francie a few sessions or two, but we talked in one of the games, Marty, and you probably remember this, like that there was a bit of a lead at half time and you're coming out after half time and you're playing into a bit of a breeze or whatever it happens to be in the circumstances. You just more or less say, look lads, nothing happens for 10 minutes, kill the game, make it difficult for the opposition, keep the ball for long periods, bide your time waste, take your time over free kicks. Now here's an interesting one for you lads, right? And this guy, Colin Trainer on Twitter, Colin's excellent. I've just started following him recently, actually. He's an Armagh native, but he's doing statistics for Gaelic football, sort of data-driven Gaelic football stuff. And he just tweeted today, and I'll read it out to you, man, and I'll get your opinion on it. In the entire first half on Saturday, I have recorded 6 possessions lasting more than 60 seconds. 4 out of the first 10 possessions during the 10 minutes at the start of the second half lasted more than 60 seconds. Is this a coincidence? Now, for me, Brian Hard's got the line. So at half-time, in the first 5 minutes of the second half, the ball was kicked back to Stephen Cluxton 3 times. That's not a coincidence, boys. That is not a coincidence. Now, they controlled the game. They dictated the game. They played the game in their terms. But, Joe, I'm going to go to a piece of game management earlier in the game. I'm going to go to a piece of game management, after the first 2 kickouts. Dublin scored the goal and Mayo responded with a point. And then Dublin lost the next 2 kickouts long. And it was Mayo's 3rd score in a row. And Stephen Cluxton went short with a possession, with a restart, and it led to a small foul, which led to a Dean Rock score. They lost 2 long kickouts again in the 22nd minute, and Cluxton went short again, and he was very, very unlucky to be blown up because the ball had just touched the 21-yard line and it was given as a hot ball. They lost another long kick out in the 29th minute. And from the next kick out, Cluxton decided to go short. Real high risk ones, really short ones where, the pressure's on, Mayo have the press on, and Dublin ended up working a score from it. So every time they lost a kick out or two, his management and his game management was, right, we need possession. And there was no panic. There was no, you couldn't see any stress. It wasn't revert to type. How many teams, Marty and Benny, have you seen in the past with kickouts in particular that you lose 4 or 5 and all of a sudden it's revert to type? Goalkeeper goes into his shell. Everybody out the field starts to panic. Along the line, there's panic, and every kick-out's kicked out, and it's kicked out, and it's kicked out. And as it says, I've been there before. I've seen it happen. It's very hard to stop that and stem that. But you have a game manager in Cluxton on the pitch on his own, Joe, who is a phenomenal captain, but also nearly a mini manager on the playing field. Sorry, Benny.
Yeah, no, that's the big thing. Cluxton, he doesn't panic. He's so good. The players out the field, you can see it. They trust him. They totally trust Cluxton. As you say, them 2 long kickouts, they went long, they lost him, but they knew not to panic because the man between the sticks. They knew to trust him and trust the process. And that's why they're so good, because they trust each and every one of them. And brains, they're very, very smart. Each and every Dublin player, they're very smart. They don't give the ball away, they keep it. They know what to do with the ball and when to do it. So, very, very smart players.
There was a moment, Joe.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Stevie.
There was a moment just after half-time, right? And I've watched it back a couple of times now, right? And it's a very, very interesting one. The very first possession of the game, Dublin went at Mayo. They went at them, right? In the second half, they didn't go at them. They actually started to play the ball about, and they made sure you can actually see McCarthy pointing at one stage to put it back to Cluxton. So they brought Cluxton out and used him nearly as a sweeper. So they weren't playing with 14 outfield players. They were playing with 15. They had lost Brian Hard, but they still had an extra man in defence as a quarterback to dictate the play, right? And from that, for 2.5 minutes, they had the ball, and it led to a foul, and it actually led to a backdoor cut that it actually should have been a goal from. Con O'Callaghan slipped. And that bout of possession, you imagine if you were Mayo coming out at start of half time, all the emphasis, like, we're going to stay in this game, we've got an extra man, blah, blah, blah. For 2.5 minutes, you don't get your hands on the ball, and Dublin carve you open for a goal chance. Like, it's unreal, and it's testament to them. Their game management is just on a different planet than every other team.
And Marty, just as Stevie says there, their game management, it doesn't happen in the last 10, 15 minutes. It happens throughout the game. It's holistic. Whereas other teams, when you say game management, they think last 5, 10 minutes. Whereas with Dublin, it's throughout the whole game, Marty.
Yeah, it is. I think with the black card incident, it was just unfortunate from a Mayo perspective that it happened right before the best backroom team in Ireland got 20 minutes to prepare what to do for it. And, you know, obviously, if it happens in general play, you might get 2 or 3 minutes where there's a bit of organising. But, you know, Dublin were magnificent in that 10 minutes. I think this Dublin team has seen it all before. They've saw teams pag it out and they've beaten that. They've had teams go man v man, essentially, like Kerry and Mayo. Somebody needs to try something with a decent team that's completely new. Whatever it is, something out of completely crazy, 10 men up, whatever it is, because they've seen it all, they've learned from it all, they've planned for it all. And it's until like the Jim McGuinness 2014, where it was novel, it was intense, it was well executed. And somebody will come up with this, and a team will execute it. And you know, but
Marty, I can tell you now from experience, 10 men up doesn't work, because we tried it against one in the minors on Sunday.
But as you say, Marty, everybody's tried everything. As you say, they've packed out the defence. Mayo pushed up the idea, Kerry pushed up and then man to man, dropping 10 back.
But Benny, can I ask you a question, right? Has anybody gone, Jim McGuinness has hinted at this, has anybody gone, right? And I think, and this is the thing for me, lads, you look at soccer, right? You look at rugby, you look at different sports. Nobody cares how their team sets up to get a result. But in Gaelic football, for some reason, there's a narrative out there that nobody wants to be associated with a really negative style of play or a real attritional style of play. And has there anybody, Benny, really gone now with what I would call an ultra-defensive, aggressive intensity? McGuinness talks about this defensive intensity. And listen, there is obviously a limitation to it, but I'm talking about one of the more superior teams that is there stages of the game where they could go, Benny, with a really aggressive defensive structure that has got serious intensity, as Marty talked about, in and around that D. Pick their moments, stay in the game for as long as possible and bring them down the stretch with 15, 20 to go, and then maybe go, Benny, with the press. I don't know.
Well, probably the closest team that has done that, Stevie, would have been Tyrone, but you've done it there in 2018, and you've pushed them all the way in that first half, and it was very, very close, and you had a lot of possession in that game. And as you say, like, if they get to a semi-final or a final with the likes of Tyrone, go 15 behind the ball, and really go for it. They haven't went all the defensive, but to me, the closest team, I think it was Tyrone down in Oma. I think Dublin ended up beating by 6 points, but the first half performance you give against them was outstanding.
Marty, 15 men behind the ball. Do you think that's the only way that you could beat Dublin? And obviously, if you've got the quality forwards that maybe the likes of Kerry have, is that the only way you can beat them?
If you've built a lead, Joe, yes, I do. I think if you've built a lead, of 4 or 5 points and it's getting towards the final quarter, I think it's something that teams could potentially do. But the thing I'm talking about is why their game management is so good is because there's only 3 or 4 conundrums can be thrown at them, and they know them all by now. It's until some mastermind, and he is out there with the team, and it will happen. And it's probably happening at club level already, but whatever it is, and we don't know it here now, or else we'd be in a big job. But that's what I'm thinking. That's what I think. I'd like to see them when they're thrown with this totally left field, something that's working on a team that's totally buying into it.
Well, hopefully it does happen in not too distant future. Lads, I'd be interested in here, just moving on, I'd be interested in here on some of the big decisions in the game. The referee, David Coulter, did he bottle it there for the Fitzsimmons challenge? I think it was on Lee Keegan. Was that the wrong decision? Should he have got a red card?
I definitely think it was a black card. Like, how he did not see that from where he was standing. Black card, possibly red card. He got it so wrong. If it had been the other way around, I guarantee you now, that would have been a red card if it had been the other way around.
And also as well, Benny,
he should have called it.
Also as well, Benny, the Johnny Cooper one on Aidan O'Shea as well, I thought was borderline black as well. But they're very good, Joe, at what I would call nearly the 3-quarter foul. They get away with that so much, but be under no illusions. And I don't know, Marty, Benny, if you picked up on this, like there was a couple of real cynical fouls from them as well that are really like hands up. I'm really sorry, David. I didn't really mean that one. Even James McCarthy early in the game, just a wee check, just a wee hand across the shoulder, just a wee subtle trip or a wee subtle body check, particularly in the forward line as well. I'm actually surprised that it took so long for Robbie McDade to be the victim of the black card, because their screening in the forward line at times is so blatant, but they're brilliant at it. It's something that they work on. The screening is something that they've worked on, like a basketball type movement, where a player comes in the loop, Joe, and the man who's handing him the ball nearly has the ass out, and he's just giving that defender a yard or two more to actually have to step around him. And listen, it's not, it's probably technically not a foul. The other night it was, because McDade knew what he was doing, but there's no doubt that they get the rub of the green when it comes to the big decisions. But it's interesting, like, as soon as Cooper picked up that yellow card, he materialised an injury and he was substituted then straight away, and it killed a bit more time. And, so they don't take any chances no matter how good the defender is. If that had been Fitzsimmons, who's probably their best, in my opinion, their best man marker, if it had been him, he still would have got hooked as well, But listen, there's some little vulnerabilities there in defensively, I think. But as Marty said, it's trying to find something that can catch them.
Marty, according to the rule of the law, if it's a shoulder to the chest, and it was with some considerable force, if you watch it again, the Fitzsimmons challenge on Lee Keegan, according to the letter of the law, that's a red card.
Yeah, as Benny said, he was in a brilliant position, Coulter, and look, when guys are moving at that speed and Lee's a big man, potentially it was just a poor decision. He felt it was there instead of there where it was. That could be his defence. I'm sure he would have heard the impact. Keegan would have been, that would have been railing, and that real drive, because he got the wind totally knocked out, and it was incredible that he got back up from that, because he was totally set up. And I just personally think it was a poor decision by Coulter, because he potentially thought that it was a shoulder because of his angle, because Keegan was actually turned away from him and it came there. That's the only excuse I can make from it. And if that's the letter of the law, well then it was definitely a wrong decision. But like Keegan getting up and playing on from that, like, shows you what a warrior he is, and how those Mayo guys are getting up, every morning still after losing so many finals is beyond me, and they're not bottlers. They just cannot beat Dublin.
Can I ask Joe? Can I ask Marty and Benny a question? And it's just something that Marty's touched on there. You talk, Marty, about the Mayo players, and it's something that I don't think they probably get enough respect for. How did you guys feel in 2010? I know that's a silly question, because obviously you're disappointed, but talk to us about actually the extent of the disappointment and how long it took you to get over it, if you even have got over it, Benny, Marty.
Yeah, the longer it goes on, the worse it nearly gets. You look back at it and it's just devastating even to the day. As Marty said, how them boys can keep soldiering on and on and on after losing 7, 8 finals. Like, it's testament to them. They lost a few minor finals too, under 21. So, it's so hard to move on from 2010. That was one defeat for us. But for Mayo, for them boys to take 5 and 6 defeats in finals, it was bound to be heartbreaking. And as I say, the longer it goes on, Stevie, the worse it gets. Like,
Marty, is that something you think about every day, the 2010 final defeat?
I had to leave to go to Australia to get over it, Joe. But I think, as Benny says, it does get worse as it goes on. It gets worse as it goes on. And the thing about the defeat against Cork, the people of Down actually have accepted that defeat and accepted that season was a gift from that group of players. And I have never had a Down person say a bad word about that final, about anything. It's just probably the players that are stewing. But I think in Mayo, the pain of those fans, because of what football means to them, it just must be so difficult for them guys to continuously lose in that fashion. like for them to keep going, because I personally wouldn't be able to go on. In my opinion, I wouldn't be able to get up and go to the gym and get back to the pitch for a National League. It simply would be too hard.
Some of those guys have lost 5 or 6 All-Ireland finals, haven't they, Stevie?
Yeah, they have, Joe, and that's something that I was going to say to the two boys. Like, you see what happened in 2010, right? I was involved in our under 21s that year, obviously, and you had more of a vested interest in the run, and particularly I was actually managing Martin at the time within Rake as well, and you had James Colgan and Brendan and Martin and John representing the county, so you had a huge interest in it. Like, personally, I had a huge interest in it anyway, and I felt the pain as well that day in Croke Park, and I wasn't technically involved, like, but from that point of view, down that year, lads came out of nowhere, and went on a run through the back door. The question I probably have, Joe, is like, I don't think that can happen again. I don't think that can happen again of a team outside the top 4, boys. I don't know what you think, but at the minute, lads, I see 4 or 5 counties. I see Dublin at the top, and then I see Mayo, I see Kerry, I see possibly Tyrone and possibly Donegal. And you're only saying possibly Tyrone and Donegal, because there's obviously transition happening there at the minute. But Mayo, Kerry, Dublin and me, can that happen again?
What do you think? What do you think, Marty or Benny?
Well, I suppose you can look at Tipperary and Cavan, but they never got to the final. Like that year we got to the final. We had a brilliant run. We had very little injuries. We had Marty back. I think from the first game we played in the National League till the final, we had maybe 13 boys that started that first National League against Kerry. They played in the final, or Coulter played the first National League game, and 13 of those boys played in the final. So it was a great season, and we had no injuries. Can a team do that? We were in Division 2. Can a team come from Division 2 and get to an Ireland final, beating some of the bigger teams along the way? At the minute, I can't see it. I agree with Stevie there. You're looking at Dublin number 1, and then you have Mayo and Kerry, and after that, Tyrone for me are the next best. And then after that, I think every team in Ireland can beat one another. From Tyrone down to your Tipperaries, your Cavans, even a couple of Division 4 teams. Any team can turn each other over on any given day. But to beat Dublin or to get to a final, I just cannot see it. I can't see it happening in this day and age.
Marty, what are your thoughts on that?
Same. I agree with the two boys. I really do. The gap's getting bigger, and those, Dublin are well ahead. Kerry for me are ahead of Mayo. Might sound silly to say that, but that game they lost was the perfect storm that we're trying to see as our way. Dublin can get beat, well, maybe if they're on an opposition ground and on a horrible night, and the opposition get a late goal potentially. But Kerry for me will be the next team outside of Dublin, and I know that it's 6 in a row now, but just looking at it, Kerry have 37 titles, Dublin 30. Now could be the chance to turn that over, which would be incredible, really, given how far Kerry were ahead before this started.
This episode is sponsored by Ripped, who have come on board with us. Ripped is a platform that connects coaches with their clients and athletes. Using Ripped, coaches can create individualized training programs and monitor their clients' progress via the Ripped app at www.ripped.app, where they can track exercise, training loads, and very importantly, well-being data. Ripped is used by high-performance teams such as Swim Ireland and Kerry GA, and also by gyms and online coaches to manage their clients. We're using it ourselves for the new DSS online training service, where you can have your own personal trainer and S&C coach to help you get fit and ready for the season, or just lose weight and get fit. We have a special offer for coaches over on our website, where you can get 2 months free access to Ripped. Just head over to our podcast page on dailysportscience.com/pod, and you'll find a link to sign up for that 2 months free access. If you'd like some more information on Ripped as a service, just go to www.ripped.app to read more there. Thanks again, guys, for your support. The Locker Room Podcast is brought to you by dailysportscience.com, an online elite coaching and sports science service, membership service. You can search all the information and services over at dailysportscience.com. You see everything over there. I'm here with Ross and Joe. Lads, there's loads of stuff going on at the moment. Ross, we'll run through really quick. Ross, you've got a really interesting off-season coaches CPD series, video series for the members.
Yeah, really good, Keir. So six-part presentation, 6 different topics that are kind of out there on social media and stuff. And I'm kind of, let's say, doing 3 to 4 of them, and you guys are taking the baton on that. So really good so far. We've had 2 released based on the individual training session and periodization. Recorded one recently around developing the individual player. We've got one around the physical corner, and then you guys are taking over the tactical side and also the environment and culture. So really good opportunity, especially with things going on in Ireland at the minute, to learn and keep sharing information. So really enjoyed that, really good feedback, and they'll be released throughout the next 6 weeks.
Great stuff. Joe, there's loads of Gaelic football and hurling practices gone up as well.
Yeah, there is, Kieran. Every week there are Gaelic practices going up, and I know that Ross talked about. I think I'm doing CPD session 4, which is how to set up a team tactically. So I'm putting up some kickouts there, for instance, and some defensive structures that coaches can kind of get used to in the off season and plan to bring in maybe next season. So yeah, lots of stuff there coming up on the website in terms of practices.
Good stuff. We've got an off-season GA program as well, in terms of gym program and fitness and running program as well, designed by Ben Smalley, our sports scientist as well, and overlooked by Ross as well, head of performance. So that's really good for all members. So they're all exclusive members. The last 2 things to mention then is the Locker Room webinar series, which is exclusive for our DSS members. So that's every second Monday night. We bring on an expert to do a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation through Zoom. Everyone can dial in live and then ask some questions as well. It's been really popular, and it's a brilliant new initiative. We're always coming up with these new initiatives. The last thing then to mention is the Buddy Referral Scheme. So that's where a member can send a referral to their friend. The friend will get 25% off the sign-up fee, and then the member will get access to one of the GA positional profile videos. So Ross, we did them over the last few weeks. I think there's some good content there.
Class content. I think it's a great initiative. Instead of just, normally the person who refers someone doesn't get anything, and the new member gets whatever the offer is. But this stuff is gold dust, in my opinion. You get info on what each positional essential is and what you're looking for each player and how to coach it. So it gives you real good information on developing the individual players in your team.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, for members, it's less than 15 quid a month. Ross, that's less than a Ross Bennett haircut once a month to cut back those golden locks.
And less than, I think the book I wrote 4 years ago still hasn't creeped up to 15 quid. So you're getting so much for that, for sure. Yeah, and I only get a haircut once a year, Keir, so £15 a year is not bad, I don't think.
Yeah, the girls in the house here, Ross, they just said, what is the point in Ross Bennett if he doesn't have long, flowing blonde hair? They get disappointed when it's cut.
I know, it's coming back. It's coming back.
So yeah, the book, so for the price of Ross Bennett's book, which you should all go out and buy, I've forgotten the name of it now at the moment. But
I can tell you, kids, injury prevention and rehabilitation. Now, he never knew I was going to plug that on here, but I need sales. Christmas is coming up. I need some sales. Christmas
is coming. I've got 2 copies of them here, Ross. So we can sell that off secondhand to Joe. He might be able to use it.
You need them for the doorstop in those heavy doors of yours.
Yeah, exactly. Joe, I was just about to say that you'd need a few quid for the online dating, but those days are over for you.
Yeah, I think they are, Kieran. Hopefully.
Good to hear it.
He tried to keep it quiet, but those weekends in the New Forest, we knew you wasn't going on your own, Joe.
Exactly. It was dodgy. It was dodgy. 15 quid, Joe, per month, not much.
Yeah, 15 quid a month. Yeah, I've had a look at I think 4 or 5 of the positions, and I've never ever seen as much detail in terms of the different positions in football, in Gaelic football, broken down into so much detail. So there's lots of, as Ross said, it's gold dust. There's lots of great learning points there for coaches and managers.
Great, good stuff. Okay, enjoy the rest of the episode, everybody. The podcast, remember, dailysportscience.com, and head over. We've actually started a new offer for listeners to the podcast. So just use POD20 as a voucher code to sign up membership, and you get 20% off as well. So for any new members out there or relapsed members, just use POD20 and you get 20% off membership. A good time, as the lads say, Ross was saying, with all the new CPD and everything. So a good time to join up. Okay, enjoy.